Despite being a routine part of many of our daily lives, we shouldn't forget that driving can be very dangerous, and the consequences of failure can often be dire. The concept of handing over a license to operate a 2-ton medical death machine to young teenagers has been the accepted practice for over 100 years at this point. That being said, traffic incidents remain few and far between. But today, we're going to hone in and take a closer look at 12 close calls in traffic. Number 12. Many of us are told from the moment we're able to walk that we need to carefully look both ways before crossing the street. Although this may be common knowledge to many, not everyone internalizes it, especially kids. Unfortunately for them, it only takes one mistake for things to go catastrophically wrong. In this clip, we see a street camera panning over a relatively unassuming scene. 2 people on a motorbike pull into view, and the real reason we're watching this makes itself clear. A young child attempts to sprint across the busy street, barely being wrangled in by the woman who jumped off the back of the motorbike and reached just quickly enough to save the young kid's life. It is clear from the footage that if the child had continued running uninhibited, he would have been struck by the passing vehicle and most likely killed. Although terrifying and unconventional, this experience should really nail the whole look both ways thing into this kid's memory. Number 11. Although kids may be some of the most susceptible to behavior like errantly crossing the street without looking, they're not the only ones. Plenty of full-grown adults are either careless enough, uninformed enough, or simply just absent-minded enough to do the same, as we can see in this next video. The dashcam footage of a car captures this group of women headed across the street, but for whatever reason, they decide to only look to their right instead of both ways. Doing half of the work is a start, I guess, but it's advised you spend the 2 seconds it takes to look both directions. Instead, the woman in front receives a free hug from a passing van, just grazing her slightly. It's amazing this vehicle didn't run over her foot or impact her more seriously. Luck was on her side that day in particular, and hopefully at least one person in her group will commit to looking both directions before crossing in the future. Number 10. And despite what we've seen so far, not every close call is a result of simply walking into traffic. In fact, oftentimes you don't even need to be making a mistake to fall victim to an accident. As we can see coming up, sometimes you just need to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This motorcyclist was recording with a helmet cam when something very interesting happened. Seemingly out of nowhere, the camera goes flying, and after several quick rotations in the air, it lands perfectly on the ground to reveal the scene of what had occurred. He was rear-ended by a motorist who wasn't paying attention. Luckily for him, he quickly pulled his legs up and avoided serious injury, despite being sent flying forward into the vehicle ahead of him. Although his self-preservation and lack of injury are both incredible, the most amazing part of this clip has to be the camera landing perfectly upright and facing the best angle to capture the vehicle at fault backing up. The insurance claim agents may get a bit dizzy watching this recap, but at least they'll be able to definitively prove that the biker wasn't at fault. Number 9. From motorcycles to bicycles, accidents on these forms of transportation are far more dangerous when removing all of the safety features that modern cars and trucks possess. In the next clip, we get a view at an incredibly close call between a cyclist and a much larger truck. This group of cyclists are taking an illegal ride down an interstate. Despite their ill-advised decision, it seems to be going just fine, all the way up until it isn't. The biker in front signals that he is merging lanes, and without looking, he continues to do so. He ends up pedaling right into a large truck, which tangles up with his bike and sends him crashing to the ground. As a result, the cyclist behind him also tumbled down, but amazingly, no one was seriously injured. His bike and his pride may be in shambles, but at the very least, he is alive to tell the tale. Number 8. As we've seen, you don't always have to be the one at fault for something to go terribly wrong. Sometimes innocent bystanders find themselves in way over their heads. In this next clip, that happens not just to one person, but multiple. This incident occurred on National Highway 18 in Vietnam. The dash cam of a nearby vehicle is at the perfect angle to watch the chaos unfold. A large semi-truck in the other lane jumps the barricade and crashes into traffic and stationary vehicles on the other side, sending one woman running for her life. The woman was actually holding her baby and managed to narrowly outrun the collision and resulting debris, saving her baby's and her own life. Incredibly, despite the immense destruction, there were no casualties. Their vehicles may be totaled, but they escaped with their lives. Number 7. For many on our list so far, luck has been on their side. Whether it was avoiding a nearly fatal accident, or getting lucky that their collision wasn't much more. This next clip, however, takes us to a new level of luckiness. This building security camera is panning over a nearby street when it captures a very interesting scene. This toddler is out wandering by himself when he goes to cross the street. Although he almost makes it to the other side, he slips and he falls flat on his face. Almost immediately afterwards, a vehicle rounds the corner and, without seeing the child, manages to drive directly over him without running him over. This may be a case of extreme luck, but it has to be asked where the child's parents were in this situation. Number 6. One of the leading causes for accidents is when a vehicle hits something that is in their blind spot. For some larger trucks and vehicles, the blind spots can be more difficult to keep track of, as the woman in our next clip is about to find out. The couple in this car are on a motorway when they witness a truly terrifying situation. The young girl on her motorbike is too close to the front of the large truck and completely invisible to the driver of the vehicle. Unknowingly, he completely runs over the young woman, leaving her struggling to avoid being run over by the massive truck. Amazingly, she comes out on the other end completely unscathed, though understandably traumatized. She curls up into a ball and slinks away to safety. Number 5. The very front of a truck isn't the only blind spot it has. As we're about to see, you should be very careful when you're around one that is pulling a wide turn. In this vehicle, a man on a bike is attempting to get across the street, despite the truck having already started his wide right turn. The man on the bike remains in the truck's blind spot the entire time, and he ends up getting swallowed by the vehicle. He gets tossed around a little underneath the truck, but ultimately survived the encounter. Amazingly, he was not crushed by any of the massive truck's 12 tires. Of all of the ways this scene could have played out, this has to be one of the luckiest for everyone involved. Number 4. Street racing is a surefire way to find yourself involved in several close calls if you're into that sort of thing. This next clip demonstrates exactly why that's the case. This clip, recorded in Hong Kong, shows the rear cam of a driver who is blazing through the streets with another one close behind. Unexpectedly, a pedestrian is crossing the street, and evasive maneuvers have to be taken in order to avoid hitting them. The first vehicle steers around them without much trouble, but the car in tow goes the wrong direction and ends up launching itself over the guardrail. Ultimately, the pedestrian ends up with the scare of their life but is unharmed. I'm not a betting man, but I could probably tell you who ended up winning that race. Number 3. As we've seen earlier on the list, kids have a way of nearly getting themselves killed but somehow coming out unscathed. This seems to happen pretty often, as we can see in this next video that was recorded just a few weeks ago. The passengers in this vehicle have their dash cam on and are on a routine drive when things get scary very quickly. They pull up to a stoppage in traffic when the family in the vehicle to the left exit their vehicle. The mother opens the car door for her young son, who immediately thinks that he's in an anime and begins Naruto running across the street. In an immensely close call, the child ricochets off the van that comes grinding to a quick halt, barely surviving his encounter with a vehicle that was going full speed just a half a second earlier. After blood-curdling screams and a scene straight out of a horror movie, the child is ultimately okay and is returned to safety by his mother. Unfortunately for this guy, while his Naruto run is on point, he's not quite a ninja and should be a bit more careful. Number 2. As we're getting closer to the top of our list, we need to raise the stakes a little bit. This next clip shows a scene where if anything would have been even a tiny bit different, the results would have been dire. This man is out taking a casual jog at a light pace when he receives the shock of his life. An out-of-control vehicle comes barreling through the median, coming within inches of the jogger. Had they been going even slightly faster, they would have been almost surely killed by this rampaging Range Rover. At the end of the day, despite causing a large amount of destruction, not only did the jogger survive, but also the driver of the vehicle. Honorable mentions. In this week's video, we have 4 short clips that we're going to bundle together for our honorable mentions. Let's dive right in. This woman gets knocked down but somehow manages to dodge both the car and the bike that was sent flying towards her. Next up, a rampaging road tire cuts right between this intersection, grazing the driver's arm but avoids causing much more serious damage. Some people not only survive their close calls, but choose to do so with a little style. And finally, this guy may be clearly frustrated about something, but the universe sends him a reminder that it could always be worse. Now let's get to the top spot on our list. Number 1. Traffic incidents come in many different forms, and oftentimes accidents can daisy chain, causing a pileup of several resulting accidents. That's exactly the case in our final video, but not in the way that you would think. This clip is from the dash cam of a driver in Beijing, China. The vehicles are stopped because a prior accident caused the leakage of liquefied petroleum gasoline from a tanker that crashed slightly beforehand. The blue vehicle attempts to go around the spill, but ends up driving through it, causing an immense explosion, setting a large strip of road ablaze. Despite the hellish scene and how dire it looks for the vehicles ahead, there are no casualties and only minor injuries were reported. A truly improbable ending to one of the scariest close calls I've ever seen. While most of these close calls ended with just a scare, not everyone can be so lucky. It's important to take basic precautions when operating or around vehicles, and be aware of the true power that you hold when you're behind the wheel. Even with that in mind, and with the increased popularity of dash cameras all over the world, we are surely in for more close calls in traffic.